Lost Amongst Wolves by Andrew Johnson. Cleaning my knife with an old rag as I walked away from the scene of tangled corpses reminded me of the aftermath when a dog breaks into a chicken coop. I bore bloodstains across my dark clothes. Being in the gloomy hours of early morning, my appearance could easily be mistaken for a man caught in sprinklers during a morning run. Another day, another soul saved. My reason for living. I turned and walked down the dimly lit street toward my apartment. My friends told me when I first thought of moving into the city that I would never last, that I'd grow bored and have to move back to the country. I like to think I've adapted well. Granted, my profession isn't one to be openly shared, but at least I'm keeping the citizens safe. After spending a week in my apartment looking for a job online and in the local newspapers, and finally by walking to stores, I realized no one in the city cared for others. Everyone was his own man and only watched out for himself. I took on the responsibility of protecting the innocent lives. It was tough at times, but the look on the faces of those I saved every night, their shock at seeing someone coming out of nowhere, followed by the peace of becoming a new person after the incident, fueled my desire to stay. Arriving at my apartment building, I climbed the stairs, counting every one. 16 steps for each level, 8 per section. I lived on the third floor, 48 steps for me to climb in order to make it to my level. For some reason, I always liked that number, 48. Something just felt right about stepping up so many times to make it home. Maybe the math soothed me after a rough time at work. I'm no expert on the human mind or how it functions. I just know what works for me. I came back to noticing my surroundings as I inserted my key into my door. There was a notice from my landlord tucked into the doorframe. Package at front desk for Mr. David Clark. I grabbed the paper and walked into my 3-room apartment. It had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 1 living room. The kitchen jutted out of the living room. Not much space overall, but it beat out the competitors. I closed and locked the door as I turned on the living room lights. The incandescent lighting revealed my sanctuary, complete with 3 bookshelves full of interesting reads. The title suggested information on various religions, science, psychology, crime novels, and the link between mathematics and everything else in the world. I had read every single one in excruciating detail, and gone so far as to write down notes on pads of paper, now stacked neatly on the coffee table positioned in front of my olive green couch. The more I thought about my books and my notes, the more I learned about life. Every day, more made sense. Finally, my life had a purpose. I even found a very nice young lady with whom I could see myself spending the rest of my life with. I just needed to find a way to keep my job a secret from her. Every hero has a secret identity. Every hero has one girl who knows his secret identity. I had a secret identity, and I had the girl, but I did not want the girl to know my secret identity. While this secret would undoubtedly be the hardest thing to keep from my lady, I knew I had no choice. I could not allow her to get hurt by my misfortune. Everything works together in the end. Everything has a purpose. This is what reading all the religious texts taught me, along with some other strange ideas that I found oddly relaxing. One of these ideas fueled my reason for working throughout the week. Reincarnation. I could die at any time, but I would be at peace knowing that I would come back with a second chance at life. I could save more lives, slowly working my way up the ladder until I reached enlightenment, and then I would receive all power and knowledge to forever help people follow my path. My mind became foggy with all of those ideas. My eyelids felt like curtains. I tried to focus on my next task. I walked over to my couch and sat down, gazing over the coffee table, searching for a specific set of papers. Upon finding the graph paper, I picked up the stack of 5 sheets and sank back into the couch. I held the sheets up to the artificial light, marveling at how I could draw something differently on every sheet, but when lined up and held to the light, they revealed a completely different object. Refocusing, I smoothed out the sheets in my hands and studied the drawings. It depicted an alleyway with stick figures in the middle. Stretching both sides of the alley, from building to building, were clotheslines. One clothesline was dangling from the top of the building to the ground. A stick figure, drawn in various positions, was shown to be sliding down this line to the ground below, effectively placing this figure behind a dumpster near the other stick figures. Also on these papers, I had worked out, step by step, the physics behind each part of what would happen, and how to safely perform this action. I double-checked the math. Satisfied, I turned off the lights and fell asleep on the couch. Upon waking, I noted that the top of the sun was just visible over the horizon. The evening hours were starting, and so was my job. I sat up and arched my back, stretching muscles and groaning as I did so. I glanced in the mirror between two of my bookshelves. I looked like a wolf just waking up from a long nap. Come to think of it, I felt that way too. Every dog needs a bone at some point. It was time to fetch mine. I still had on my running shoes from yesterday, along with my dark clothes of bloodstains, ready to run out the door and find my next target. I had the plans in place. I just had to wait at the specified location. I sat atop the dark brick building, looking into the alley below. The building I rested on placed me 3 stories above the ground. I had already climbed to the top of the opposing building and cut the clothesline with my pocket knife, dropping the end into the alley. If my research had been correct, and it usually was, there should be a young man entering this alley in about an hour. News reports stated that a male had raped 2 females in this alley in the past week. The time had come for that piece of trash to get his judgment. I double-checked everything I had placed beside me. A small plant in a ceramic pot, my 4-inch folding Vaquero pocket knife, my leather belt, my leather gloves, and finally a pair of rubber gloves. I was ready for the main show to play in Life's theater on my stage. As predicted, a male and female walked into the alley within the hour. In preparation, I pulled on the rubber gloves, donning the leather gloves on top. Modern-day science discovered that every pair of leather gloves had the equivalent of a fingerprint, which meant any crime could be linked to the leather gloves used. The rubber gloves used in labs, however, leave no such evidence. Also, if the leather gloves were ditched, the DNA of the owner would still be inside. While that is a possibility with the rubber gloves, the rubber ones can be utterly destroyed to leave no trace. That's why I read so many science books and crime novels, to better understand how to save lives and not get caught. I watched the male walk near the dumpster, the female clinging to his arm. How simple creatures, such as these two, underestimate the future always baffled me. The male quickly spun the female around and pinned her against the wall. I heard a giggle escape the female. The poor drunk victim didn't have a clue. I measured where the male stood and held the potted plant above his head. Before I let go, I made a note of the location of everything around me. Letting go of the plant, I quickly grabbed my belt and wrapped it around the clothesline cord, holding both ends tightly in my gloved hands. I dropped straight down from the roof cord, sliding between my shoes and my belt. To slow down, I pulled tighter on the belt, straining my muscles as smoke began to rise. 3 feet above the ground, I let go of one end of the belt, allowing it to unwrap, and thus forcing myself to drop the rest of the way. Upon landing, I crouched into a roll to convert the momentum of falling energy into rolling energy. When I came up, I saw that the potted plant had hit the male on the head, effectively cracking his skull and knocking him unconscious. The female was screaming and backing against the dumpster. She never saw me. I took the belt, looped it around her neck, and quickly pulled. The screaming stopped as her soul left. The poor female, desecrated by this male, could now be at peace as her soul found a new entity in which to enter. I could sleep well knowing that I had saved another soul from a life of torment. I stepped over her now empty body toward the male. I ensured his death by quickly twisting his head in the opposite direction of his body with my gloved hands. Confident in tonight's catch, I removed the leather gloves and tossed them into the dumpster. I walked out of the alleyway through the back gate, removing my rubber gloves, placing them in my pocket as I did so. Once I arrived home, I dropped the gloves in the ceramic sink and poured chemicals on them, melting the rubber and disposing the final pieces of evidence. Once finished, I took a shower to remove the blood and grime of dirty souls from my person and prepare for a new day. I finished the evening by reading a book until I fell asleep. The next night, I made my way across town to a charity event. Dressed in a nice pinstripe suit, I would fit in just fine. When I arrived, I was amazed to discover that this charity event was meant to sponsor the homeless, yet did not have a single homeless person anywhere. As I looked closer and listened to pieces of conversation, I realized that the host who had started this event had grown a couple $1 million richer because of it. He was pocketing all the money that was meant to go to the homeless. This was unacceptable, and I had to say as much to the host. I found him on the balcony of the second floor with two other gentlemen talking. When I approached, they all exchanged glances. Then the two walked away, leaving the host and me. "How can I help you?" the host asked, sipping his glass of wine. "I have a message from the homeless in this town," I replied as I walked to the railing of the balcony, looking to the distance beyond any scenery that was supposed to capture attention. "What do you mean? What homeless?" the man said, oblivious to my purpose. He stepped beside me, which gave me the perfect opportunity. I used my leg to sweep his legs from under him as I simultaneously used my hand to force his head against the concrete railing. Blood drops stained the railing as the body fell backwards. I picked up the struggling host, grasping him by the neck. "I mean, you have been robbing the poor of this town for too long. It's time you start giving back instead of taking. You had your chance to help people. Now that chance is gone." I tightened my fingers around his throat as I carefully lifted him off the ground and pushed him against the railing. "Why are you doing this?" he struggled to say. He squirmed and kicked. His hands attempted to pull mine away, but to no avail. "Because someone has to save the less fortunate, and since I don't see anyone else stepping up, that job falls to me." I felt his soul crying out in anguish at his deeds as he looked horrifically at me. The energy I felt in this moment from this body before me was satisfyingly excruciating. His fear encouraged remorse, and remorse meant he had a chance at a better life next time. "But why kill me?" "To bring your judgment closer. The best part is, I know not whether you will get the chance to help others again, or if you will come back as one needing help. And I don't care either." With that, I finished squeezing the life out of his physical form and threw the empty shell of a body over the railing. Down below, someone screamed, but it didn't matter. The deed was done. I impress myself sometimes. This evening had barely started, and I'd already finished my night's quota. Well, sometimes it's better to be an overachiever than to stay with the status quo. I walked away in search of another soul to save. As I left the party, several squad cars from the local police department pulled in front of the building. It was no matter for me. I was out of their range for quarantining. I had walked beyond the block and began looking for my next target when I heard something that definitely did not belong. I stood still and listened, hoping I wasn't correct. A spotlight flashed across cars on the other side of the street, informing me that the cops were coming. I walked briskly until I found an alley I knew would lead me through the back streets to my home. Turning down the alley, I jogged over to a dumpster and ducked behind. I breathed hard as the searchlight shone down the alley. When they finally moved on down the street, I stood up and dusted myself off. I walked down the alley and through the back streets of the lonely city. With any luck, I escaped the law yet again, but this time I felt exhausted for a reason I couldn't understand. I looked in every direction, scanning the dark street and charcoal gray buildings that appeared as dead as I felt. I heard two voices rise up behind my back in the alley from which I had just emerged. I cursed. They found me at last. I reached deep into my reservoir of energy and sprinted down the street, turning the lighted windows on either side into fireflies around me. The voices grew louder, and I knew I had to take a stand. I rolled behind a dumpster just outside another alley and waited. I wasn't going down without a fight. The voices rounded the dumpster's corner, and I attacked. I jumped directly on top of the original voice. Except no one was there. Panting like a deer running from a pack of wolves, I looked for the source of the voices. All was quiet. Curse these souls for haunting me. Didn't they realize I was making the world better? Did they want people to suffer instead of getting another chance at life? I realized I needed to be inside of the protective canopy of my home if I wished to survive the night. The voices returned from the alley, and I once again opened my energy reserve and ran home. I made it in just under 5 minutes, but the voices were close behind me and gaining. I took the steps 3 at a time, jumping as hard as I could on each set. As I neared the third flight of metal stairs, I looked back to see how close the voices were. I heard the voices just behind me, though I could not see anything. They were too close. My left foot slipped through the back of the current steps as I was pushing myself forwards. My foot went down, my shin hit the next step, my right leg and foot caught the step just above, and my arms flailed out to catch myself. The metal step cut into my shin, and the force of my right leg continuing my previous step as my left leg fell caused my left foot to slide onto the catch of the step below. My left ankle became trapped. I heard the popping come from my ankle as tendons broke. Felt the shattering in my shin as the stairs pressure proved too much for my bones, and saw the steps ascending toward my face. I placed my hands between my face and the steps, softening the impact. I blacked out as the force of the impact shook my skull and its innards. Fortunately, or rather, unfortunately, I didn't stay without vision for long. I came to consciousness in time to experience my body falling down the stairway and crashing into the metal railing at the end. The railing gave way and tumbled to the ground 2 stories below. The lousy, rusted railing was never worth anything. I figured it would give out at some point when I actually needed it. I looked down and saw my leg. I hung from the metal paneling, left leg broken and hanging at an unnatural angle. Interesting how I could no longer feel it, but I could swing it like a bar of soap placed in a long sock. I watched curiously as it dangled until I heard the voices again. They seemed to be under, above, and in front of me. "Hero, look at our hero," they said in a voice that reminded me of a gas leak. "Look at the helpless hero. He saved our souls. Now save himself. Hero, look at our hero." My hands became sweaty and began to slip. I looked for a handhold. My hand slipped, dropping me a couple of inches closer to falling on top of the metal railing that was already on the ground below. The voices continued taunting me, repeating the same phrases over and over. My hands slipped more. I screamed out for salvation. "Help! Help me, please! I saved your souls. Now have mercy on mine." My hands slipped again. I could swear it felt like something was lifting my fingers up, one by one. Finally, my strength gave out and I fell, watching in terror as the stairway flew up. Felt like I was still in thick air and everything was traveling away from me. Time seemed to slow, allowing me to think my last thoughts. The main thought being, if I die, who will continue my legacy of saving the lost souls in this world? Blackness enveloped me as I fell, blotting out everything else. I kept falling, no stopping. It seemed the wolves of this world, which I fought against, had finally caught up to me.